sets are not the only things that can be brought back and used again through ingenuity and a little rearranging. This particular tune is not a new one. It was brought back, and it's healthier and bigger than ever. It's called Little Bitty Pretty One. Ladies and gentlemen, Frankie Lymon.
Franklin Joseph Lymon, who was known professionally by his stage name Frankie Lymon, was an American rock and roll and rhythm and blues singer, born on September 30th, 1942, in the famous Harlem neighborhood in New York. Lymon started his singing career after hearing a children's doo-wop group at his school's talent show called the Coup de Villes. Frankie became friends with the lead singer named Herman Santiago. Shortly after, Lymon joined the doo-wop group that now called itself the Ermines in the premieres. A close friend of Lymon named Dennis Jackson donated the young singer $500, which would be the equivalent of $4,760 in today's money. This money heavily helped his career. In 1955, a fan wrote love letters to Lymon. Later, one of the letters would be adapted into a song. This song would be their biggest hit, and that song was Why Do Fools Fall in Love? The group later renamed themselves the Teenagers. The group impressed a man named Richard Barrett, a singer from another group named the Valentines. After an impressed Barrett heard them, he got them an audition with a record producer named George Goldner. On the day of the audition, the lead singer was late. Lymon stepped up and sang the song. That day, the group became known as Frankie Lymon and the Teenagers. Goldner signed the group to G Records, and the song reached number 6 on the Billboard Pop Singles chart and topped the R&B charts for 5 weeks. The group followed the success of Why Fools Fall in Love with other hits such as I Want You to Be My Girl. The ABCs of Love.
I'll always want you because my heart is true. Come closer, and I'll tell you of the ABC.
And many other singles. I Want You to Be My Girl became the group's second hit, reaching number 13 on the national Billboard Hot 100 chart. In 1957, the group split during a tour in Europe. Goldner began pushing Lymon as a solo act and giving Lymon many spots on TV and radio. By September 1957, Lymon had officially departed the group and started his solo career. Sadly though, after a few acts, it was made evident that Lymon was much less successful as a solo act. After this big career move, Lymon switched to Relay Records. A blow to Lymon occurred when he appeared on an episode of Alan Freed's live show on ABC called The Big Beat. On the show, Lymon danced with a teenage white girl. His actions caused a huge scandal among Southern TV station owners. Subsequently, after the scandal, Alan Freed's show was canceled. No surviving footage remains as the show was taped over, according to Alan Freed's wife, Judith. By this time in his career, Lymon was a heroin addict, being introduced to it at the age of 15 by a woman twice his age. To make matters worse, Relay Records ended their contract with Lymon shortly after he entered a rehabilitation center. During the later years of his struggling career, Lymon had short-lived deals with 20th Century Fox Records and Columbia Records. On June 21, 1966, Lymon was arrested due to a heroin charge and was later drafted into the Army in the lieu of a jail sentence and was stationed at Fort Gordon, Georgia, near Augusta, Georgia. During his time in the Army, he met a woman named Amira Eagle. They later married in June 1967. While serving, Lymon repeatedly went AWOL to secure small gigs at Southern clubs. Lymon would be dishonorably discharged from the Army. It's 1968. After leaving the Army, Lymon moved into his wife's home and continued performing around New York. But not all was lost. Things were looking good for Lymon. He was signed by manager Sam Bray to his Big Apple record label and returned to the studio to record records. Relay Records expressed interest in releasing Lymon's records in conjunction with the Big Apple, and scheduled a recording session for February 28th. With it came huge promotion. During this, Lymon was staying at his grandmother's home where he grew up. To celebrate his good fortune, Lymon took copious amounts of heroin. He had remained clean ever since joining the Army 3 years prior. On February 27, 1968, Lymon was found dead of a heroin overdose at the age of 25 on the floor of his grandmother's bathroom.
You know, we've talked an awful lot about a lot of moods and their reflections in terms of music. But now we come to a mood that is the product of our present generation. The bubbling enthusiasm of our teenagers was the inspiration for what is now the most popular style of music in the country, rock and roll. A few short weeks ago, 5 teenage boys went into a recording studio, and they said they had a song they wanted to sing. Well, it took a little time, 3 weeks to be exact, but they were heard, and their song was recorded. It is now the #1 record in America. And the song is, Why Do Fools Fall in Love? The boys appropriately enough call themselves the Teenagers. Well, here you are. So, you guys are the Teenagers.
That's right, Mr. Lane.
Come on, boys. Let's sing our song then.
That come out of you?
Yes, sir. Can we sing now?
What's your hurry?
I have to make my money before my voice changes.
Good news for you, Dad. It ain't gonna go much lower. You're in a barrel now. Frankie, you amaze me. Tell me something. You're only 13 years old, and yet you wrote this big hit. How did it ever happen?
Well, Mr. Lane, one day I was dressing, and inspiration came to me, so I wrote the song.
Oh. Well, what was the inspiration?
I needed a new suit.
Well, that's a pretty good reason. But I can't understand how you could write Why Do Fools Fall in Love? What does a 13-year-old boy know about love?
Well, Mr. Lane, I've been falling in love since I was only 5.
5?
But I've been a fool about it since I was 11.
Well, don't complain, lad. You've only had 2 rough years. I go all the way back to Bridie Murphy. I think we've had enough of this little chit-chat. This is your first nationwide television appearance, isn't it?
That's right, sir.
And I know that everybody's waiting to hear you sing, so are you ready to rock and roll it?
That's right.
That means I ought to get lost, huh?
That's about it. Why do fools fall in love?